we have experienced that beauty is yet to be discovered, to be discussed and analyzed, but above all, that beauty is a discussion. Our next two guests will briefly explain and go on a further discussion on various aspects of this phenomenon called beauty. Laurent de Sutter is a philosopher and professor of law theory at the VUB and will go in dialogue with international conceptual artist Koen Vanmechelen.
While for Laurent, beauty is merely an ever-changing Western concept, Koen sees beauty as the interaction of different pieces of a puzzle. We have prepared for them several topics, which you can see here in the bowl, and they will, at random, pick a topic and discuss it briefly. They'll have time for 4 topics. So please welcome Laurent de Sutter and Koen Vanmechelen.
Good evening.
Yeah, how are you? Not completely wet, I hope, and I hope that the papers are not. We don't know about the topics, so it's going to be some kind of a random bar discussion by 2 people who don't know anything about what they will have to discuss about. So please bear with our stupidity or lack of insight.
True. Shall I start? Do you start?
Yeah. Will you pick one? Yeah.
Yeah?
Let's see what we have to deal with.
My God. Oh. Living with the true pandemic.
All right.
You start, me start?
I don't know. Do you have an idea already?
Well, I have an idea. Living with the pandemic. I think if we talk about beauty, also a pandemic can have some beauties. If I think about the term protecting the other, is something deep inside of us. And also keeping distance. If we translate distance, for example, through nature, that we can say, you know, can we come close to a tree, for example? Is it allowed to come close to the tree? Did we ask? Because I think also that the pandemic, it started by coming too close into nature. And by not asking nature, can we do this? Coming on places that we don't belong. Something like this. Living with the pandemic, we can learn a lot, I think.
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree, and I do agree even more than you might think, because when you go back to the very idea of pandemic, where it comes from, and where it comes from also in terms of vocabulary and language, and we look at where the word epidemic first started, it obviously first started, it first started in ancient Greece. But it had nothing to do with diseases at the time. When you spoke about an epidemic in ancient Greece, the epidemic was basically a ritual or a ceremony. And a ritual of a ceremony of a certain type, namely the ritual of the ceremony of welcoming the traveling and the wandering gods when they would enter. So this is the type of ritual by which you would decide eventually of the type of transaction, the type of negotiation that you would have with what the Greeks called the xenoi, the foreigners, but foreigners with whom you could talk, you could exchange things. So for them, pandemic was not something you have to be immune of or try to put aside, but something that is actually part of the way of coexisting with foreign things, but that are still part of you. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, that's very nice. And I'm also thinking when you're telling this, we see this as something negative, a pandemic, which can be, because we are not used to thinking in a symbiotic way. If I think the bat, you know, who is carrying the coronavirus, for example, for the bat is just a defending system against us. So we have to respect actually that kind of distance as well, because, you know, for the coronavirus, good environment to live in. And if we should think about this, how that kind of circle of symbiotic way of living together, probably we can also learn from that part. And that, I feel a little bit when you were telling that story, that it come close to this. it can be a beautiful dance as well, in my opinion.
Indeed, but are we already in our 4 minutes?
Yeah?
Not yet? Oh, we can continue. Oh, right.
Oh,
Fantastic.
We can go on.
Then I have a last proposal for an answer to the question of what is the true, or what would be the true pandemic. Insofar as it's about coexistence, negotiating things with species and so on, so being close, too close, or question of the closeness with the world. Actually, maybe the true pandemic is the world itself, meaning the fact that we have built a world where we circulate and where viruses circulate with you. So take the train, take the plane, with us, and so that what makes the world, it's really what also makes the world the pandemic. It's as if it was exactly the same.
Yeah, but also I think we are very pretentious. We are thinking that we are standing above nature, and then we are forgotten that we are part of nature, because pure biologically, why shouldn't we get a virus, for example? Why are we better than other species? In my project, I'm dealing with crossbreeding with chickens. I was already for 6 times in a pandemic. I saw them dying because of a pandemic. We are also domesticated animals, and that makes us in another position and weaker. And at the same time, we forget that we are part of that whole kind of global circle, And so I think we have to slow down a little bit and to see our position in the right way.
Well, thank you. Let's try another one. Shared spaces, urban.
Okay.
Yeah, about sharing.
Well, for me, shared spaces, I think, so it's actually a topic that I'm dealing with. Hybridity, for example, it's, in my opinion, a shared space, because you're trying... First of all, there is a personal level in shared spaces. If you discover the other in yourself and you discover then the other, that's actually a reason to exist. You only exist because of the other. And I think that's very beautiful. On the other hand, if I think shared spaces, I think about communities. Communities, which is a word that is coming up now for the last 5 to 10 years. Before, we didn't know that a community was really something for Africa, South America, and not really in Europe anymore. We were forgotten that we are living at communities. And for me, the shared spaces, as being a community, is a very important space that we should use today as being a lab where we can do really great experiments. Because if we're putting some ideas inside of a community and it can survive, then we can enlarge it to a bigger idea. So it's a kind of space, a breeding space for new leaders in one way or another. And I think we need that. We need that kind of thinking now. Because if we put it immediately in a bigger on a bigger level, and there is a mistake inside, you cannot read if it is working very well, and then it's too late, and then you have this kind of defaults which you can't control anymore. Not that you have to control everything, but the beauty of everything is disappearing, in my opinion. So shared spaces for me are very important, I think, to learn how we can live together. This is for me a kind of humanity.
All right, nice one. I don't know if I have much to say about shared spaces. The only thing maybe that comes to my mind is the idea of, when you are to share something, for instance, a place, a space. Well, there's this strange idea, sharing. When we speak about sharing or shared spaces today, the first image that comes to my mind is this kind of co-working cafe, for hipsters, where indeed you share a space against a fee, of course, and then you have your coffee and your laptop and you do some work and so on and so forth. So there's this kind of link between the idea of sharing and the idea of, let's say, possessing. So, or the idea of even ownership. So you share something that you possess. And I wonder if, speaking of shared spaces, in order to define a horizon where it's really about building up a new form of commons or commonality or communality, if sharing is the right word for that, because precisely it implies already some kind of a takeover on certain reality or certain geography, and then also some kind of a power over this geography and the capacity to occupy the space and the capacity to fulfill the conditions for the occupation of the space and so on and so forth. So I don't have another word, actually, for speaking of shared spaces, except maybe for the fact that rather than sharing these things that we would eventually possess, maybe we could speak about inhabiting spaces, for instance, and thinking of commonalities in terms of habiting together, for instance. Again, maybe the idea of coexistence that the Greeks were so fond of. But that would be the end of my intervention.
Really? Little thing. Shared spaces for me is that, you know, it's about respect. You have two identities who are coming together, and on a certain point there is a kind of ID that matched, and this is a shared space, and you don't have to give up yourself, but you learn something which is completely new. So this is evolution, in my opinion, and there's the beauty. Something like that. Bonus, what is this?
Bonus. You pick one, is that it? No?
Choose your topic.
Oh, okay.
You can do.
Maybe we could discuss about, you know, climate for a change for a moment. I don't.
Or what is beauty?
Or what? Yeah, that would. Yeah,
we hear so much about beauty today.
And it's quite funny about when we speak about beauty. I always have this sentence by the great French artist Marcel Duchamp that comes into my mind when he speaks about what he calls the primacy of the retinal in the world of art and in the world of beauty. Precisely the primacy of the gaze. And we have seen tonight, by the way, that of course there are all other types of senses that can be involved when we speak about beauty. But when he spoke about the idea of the retinal, and he said that it was some kind of a model, so to speak. Even when we hear, when we taste, or when we touch, actually it's the same model as the model of the eye looking at something that indeed does something to us. And Duchamp was very against that, as you know. And he was very against that because he thought that the primacy of the retinal, the primacy of beauty understood as an experience, causes a situation where the spectator, you know, the person attending a show or the person tasting a cake, is in a position which is a very strong position, maybe a too strong position, a position which is too powerful, so to speak. The position to simply say about what he or she is experiencing, if it's good or bad, if it's beautiful or if it's ugly. So to, let's say, to crush what you're experiencing under the power of the judgment that you pose on your experience. And he's saying maybe we should try and get rid of beauty understood in that sense, and try and see if beauty, for whatever that means, wouldn't go in another direction where the question would not be whether our experience is nice or not nice, is the experience is beautiful or not beautiful, is pleasant or unpleasant, but really how the object itself transforms something, makes us do something which has nothing to do with beauty or whatever, but that alters, transforms our experience and makes us explore a part that we wouldn't otherwise. And I think that there's something quite nice to that. You know, the idea that judgment, critique, understood as the application of judgment, the primacy of the subject, should take place to the primacy of the object, perhaps, which is, of course, problematic in a consumption society as ours, of course. But you know, there's something there, something that at least puts us as viewers in a weaker position than the position of the judgment of taste. And I think that we need more weakness, especially when it's about
More
a
faults.
relationship with art.
Yeah, for me, you know, beauty is always something that that comes from, that grows from inside to outside, and then the shape is there. You know, if you start to shape it in advance, I don't believe it has that power of beauty. So you can't criticize beauty as being ugly or beautiful. Very recently, I made a show that called "Do Not Argue," and if you take the first letter, you say, "Is this what it is?" And there it comes from. So beauty also depends on the environment, because if the environment is changing, the object is changing. When the object is changed, the environment. It's a kind of what we think what was very beautiful in the past, we probably think today that's very ugly. So it depends on with this object. And for me, you know, that in art is like a comment on society. So you take it as a social approach as well, coming from your nature in the mix with society. And that's why art comes from artificial, in my opinion. So it has to do with an artificial vision. And when it's carried that vision, it conquers the environment. And then there comes, in my opinion, a beautiful dialogue or a beautiful discussion with an audience that you don't know. And in commercial terms, they start to play with this. For example, if you look at fashion, you know, they're gonna just choose for something which is very rare. You know, for example, on a certain moment, everybody has to have long legs. So, you know, but if you really think, it doesn't exist really. Regular, it's rather rare. So then they're gonna focus on that point, and then everybody wants to have long legs. You see, and this is a commercial trick of beauty, and that's about the environment, I think.
I have nothing against long legs personally.
Oh, of course.
So we have a last one?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe we have already answered that somehow. Can we learn from Greek philosophy of philosophers?
Of course.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can? Okay, next. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Of
Okay.
course.
Oh, but precisely, climate. It's there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. What it said?
Climate.
Just climate.
Climate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Deal with it.
I think the term climate, you know, now it becomes very fashionable to talk about climate. I think we have to talk about nature. I think nature is more concrete to take action. Climate, it's in the air, you know. It's too abstract. And I have the feeling that the broader audience does not really understand what climate is. Of course, you can say there is less rain now, there is many rain, there is a lot of sunshine. But I think if we talk about respecting nature, we understand. So I think we have to change that term, because we are playing every day in and with nature. And I think that could be a stronger approach. And I'm totally agree that but that's already a story for many years. I don't understand that really the politics is not taking that very serious. nature is the winner. This is it will regulate, and we have to think about ourselves to survive, not to help the climate. That doesn't make any sense, because that will be the winner, and that will be regulate itself. Just like this, can you imagine that tomorrow the sun is shining 100 degrees 20 minutes? We are all gone, huh? It's over, and then where are we standing? But actually, is the same answer as what when we started with the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic. Now we're thinking, oh, should somebody think that this is going to happen? Of course, it's going to happen. I mean, we are not better than something else. Of course, we have a mind, and we can think about and inventing things, but we have to use it to live together and to survive, because these are the two important things that we have to do. And in a way, we need nature as being the inspirator for what we are trying to do, but that means that we have to have a lot of respect for it, which we don't have. We just see it as to use and to abuse. I don't understand it at all.
Yeah, we could discuss, but it would take much more than 4 minutes about nature, what it is, where it comes from, does it exist, and does it exist at all? The only one thing that I would like to react upon is indeed the idea that maybe the vocabulary that we use is not very good. And I just want to quote, not to quote, but to tell you about a French philosopher whose name is Marc Alizard, and who has published just before the lockdown, basically, a short book called, well, in English it would be The Climate Coup, where he says that when we speak about climate or climate crisis and so on and so forth, there's something that we tend to forget, namely the fact that we are not all in the same boat, of course, and we are not all in the same, we don't have the same desire directed towards the idea of climate crisis, climate change, and so on and so forth. We tend to imagine that we're all in the same situation, and then we need to indeed stick together, and that, if we don't unite, there cannot be winners in the situation. Well, what Marc Alizard says is that, well, this is not true. And actually, there are groups of people on this planet who have huge interests into the fact that the climate enters into crisis. And he names two groups, namely one who has an economical interest with it, because, I mean, it's something that we know about the history of economics, is that you can always bet on the fact that you will lose and then get something out of it. And it's the same with some politicians who also have something to gain from the fear that the situation would instill, and this is something that we are seeing. So I would add to the idea of the vocabulary that we need, that when we look at climate and climate change, we never forget that this is also about power, and a power that we need to strongly resist.
Yeah. Well, I think that, to end up, I think that the beauty is in nature. We have to learn actually from that. And so with a lot of respect to this, we know that all our knowledge is coming from there. And all the things that we add to this is a story. And the story is only for 50% true, I think. So we should better watch deeper and deeper in what nature is telling us to make conclusions for the future.
Thank you.